Today, we're diving into something truly incredible out of Nepal, a tradition where a young girl is worshipped as an actual living goddess, a figure so powerful, even kings have bowed down before her.
But let me just start with a question for you. What if a little kid's smile or their tears could do more than just show you how they're feeling? What if they could actually foretell your destiny, or maybe even the fate of an entire country?
It sounds like something from a fantasy novel, right? But for centuries in Nepal, this has been a deeply held reality. There, a young girl is chosen to be a living goddess, and her every single expression is seen as a direct message, a prophecy from the divine. So let's get into who she is and how in the world she is chosen.
We're talking about the royal Kumari. She's a figure who is revered by both Hindus and Buddhists, and this tradition goes back thousands of years. But who is she, really? Okay, so the word Kumari literally means virgin. She is always a young girl who hasn't hit puberty yet, and she's chosen from a specific clan within the Newari community. Now, here's the really important part. She isn't just a symbol or a representative. No, for the time she is chosen, she is the Goddess Taleju, a super powerful form of Durga living inside a human body. And her power is considered absolute. For centuries, Nepal's kings would literally bow before this little girl to get her blessing. It's believed that just a glance from her can completely change your fortune. But her expressions, that's where things get really intense. A calm, neutral look, that's good, a sign of favor. But get this, a smile is often taken as a prophecy of death for whoever she's looking at. And if she cries or laughs out loud, that could signal a national disaster is on its way. So you're probably wondering, how on earth is a mortal child chosen for a role with stakes this high? Well, the selection process is one of the most intense spiritual and physical tests you can possibly imagine. And it all starts with a search for total perfection. It all boils down to a single number, 32. That's the number of perfections, these physical and personal traits that a potential Kumari has to have, which are said to mirror the goddess herself. And we're not talking about simple things here. The requirements are incredibly poetic and impossibly strict. A candidate needs to have a chest like a lion, thighs like a deer, and a voice as clear as a sparrow's. Her body has to be absolutely flawless, not a single scar, no birthmarks. She can't have ever been seriously sick or even have lost a single baby tooth. It is a hunt for pure physical perfection. Now, for the handful of girls who actually pass that physical inspection, the real test of divinity begins. And honestly, these are trials designed to test for absolute fearlessness. So picture this. The candidate, who's often just 4 or 5 years old, first has to walk through a courtyard filled with the freshly sacrificed bodies of 108 buffaloes and goats, and she cannot show any fear. If she does that, she then has to spend an entire night all alone in a dark room surrounded by those same severed heads, while priests in scary masks try to frighten her. Any hint of fear and she's disqualified. And the final proof? She has to correctly pick out the ceremonial clothes of the Kumari who came before her, proving she remembers her past life as the goddess. Once a girl passes these unbelievable trials, her life changes in a heartbeat. She leaves her family, her home, her entire childhood behind to start a totally new existence. And this really gets to the core paradox of being a Kumari. On the one hand, she's worshipped by everyone, she lives in a palace, and her feet are so sacred they're not even allowed to touch the ground outside. But on the other hand, all that divinity means giving up a normal childhood. She's isolated, can't just go out and play with other kids, and has to stay completely stoic and expressionless whenever she's in public. Her life is run by a super strict set of rules. She only really talks to her family and her caretakers. She leaves the palace only about a dozen times a year, and even then, she's carried everywhere. Everything from what she eats to what she wears is controlled. And maybe at the most critical rule of all, her divinity is tied to her physical wholeness. A single significant cut that draws blood can end her reign, just like that. But why? Why does this intense tradition even exist? Well, the origin is in an ancient legend, a story about a king, a goddess, and a promise that was broken. The legend says that the last Malla king used to secretly play dice with the goddess Taleju herself. She warned him that no one else could ever see them together. But one night, his queen got suspicious and spied on them. The goddess was furious that the vow was broken, so she vanished, and the kingdom started to fall apart. The
The king, totally desperate, prayed for her to come back, and eventually she appeared in a dream, saying she would return, but not in her divine form. Instead, she would be reincarnated in the body of a young girl. And that's how the search for the very first Kumari began.
But the goddess doesn't stay in one human body forever. A Kumari's time on the throne is limited, and the end of her divinity is just as sudden as its beginning.
The moment a Kumari has her first period, her time as a living goddess is over. It's that simple. That biological milestone, or a serious injury that causes bleeding, is the sign that the Goddess Taleju has left her body. She then becomes a mortal girl again, goes through one last ritual, and is sent back to her family with a government pension to try and start a normal life. But you can imagine, trying to fit back into society is incredibly hard. For years, she was a goddess whose feet couldn't even touch the ground. Now she has to learn how to walk among people, how to talk to kids her own age, how to just be ordinary. And what makes it even harder is this old superstition that says any man who marries a former Kumari will die young, which makes finding a partner and having a family a huge challenge for many of them. So in the end, her life is this profound contradiction. She's a symbol of incredible power and purity, a bridge between our world and the divine, but at the same time, she's a child living a life of intense isolation and rules. Which really brings us to the ultimate question at the heart of this whole tradition, one that people are still debating today. Is being a Kumari the highest divine honor imaginable, or is it a childhood that's been lost to the demands of a goddess?